Hello, I'm Bob the Booker and welcome to my channel. And today I wanted to talk about the books that I've been reading this week. And it's a fun little set. It's a sort of slightly truncated version because I'm sort of filming this earlier in the week because I'm going to be on holiday by the time this video comes out. So there we go. Did I mention that I'm going on holiday? I haven't mentioned it before. There we go. I'll be on a little trip, but I wanted to talk a little bit about some of these books first, partly because I think one of them that I'll talk about in just a moment won a prize recently and is one that I've wanted to talk about a little bit recently anyway. So with that in mind, let's get started talking about these books. So first up, we have Lost in the Garden by Adam S. Leslie. And this won its category, I believe, in the Nero Prize, the Nero Book Awards. And I'm wearing my little, I don't know, is that visible? My little jumper that is from Dead Ink, which is the publisher of this. And this book, I think, is just such a wild and bizarre thing, but in quite a beautiful way, I think. The core idea is that a group of friends are heading towards this village. And this sort of town or village, what is it called again? Almanby. And there's a sort of a degree of hesitation from everyone they speak to about this, where the overriding feeling is don't go to Almanby. And these characters have different motivations for why they might want to go there and various parts about their histories. But it very quickly descends into this quite murky, bizarre folk horror book. And so it's odd because it starts with these sort of sing-songy things or these conversations between friends. It's got this recurrent theme of passages from a folk tale or a sort of song and all these other little things. So it's this really, there's a small town, old England kind of feel to a lot of this anyway. But then what keeps on happening is these characters unravel more and more layers about who they are. And we find out this really interesting set of backstories for how they've all come to be there. It's quite a bizarre little book. I would say little, it's about 400 pages, but it's quite a bizarre book. And I really enjoyed what it does. It's very offbeat and very it's quite left field in its approach. So for example, there is one character who is a stand-up comedian, and quite a lot is made in the book about how she is quite almost the unexpected comedian. She is somebody who day to day lives with this almost crushing level of anxiety and fear and everything else, and is just sort of hobbling through things and has this massive crush on someone and all these other things. And then you hear her stand up, and at one point half a chapter is just her stand up and these one-liner jokes, and they are really quite funny and they're quite dad jokey, but they're really quite funny. And I like that the book just has this inside it as this extra little fun piece to play around with. So yeah, it's just quite a bizarre book, and I really enjoyed the odd atmosphere it slowly builds up to welcome you into this strange little village. Next up, a bit more of a classic here, Tennessee Williams, A Streetcar Named Desire. And I saw the production of this a couple of weeks ago, I think it was, with Paul Mescal as Stanley. The beautiful, beautiful Paul Mescal. And it was a really fab thing, particularly because I realised, sort of shock horror, I had neither read nor seen any of it before. I knew obviously a bit about it, the kind of cultural impact it's had and the kind of the way it sits in the zeitgeist and in the kind of cultural imagination, but I hadn't actually ever read it or interacted with it in any other version, whether the film or the play or anything else. And I really greatly enjoyed it. I thought it was really quite staggering how much is packed into this, and particularly the character of Blanche I find utterly riveting. For background, for people who maybe who aren't that familiar with it, Blanche comes to town after a period of not having seen her sister for a while, and slowly as she appears there, she in many ways upsets the kind of the order of things, but also we come to realize that a lot more is going on than we think. So firstly, Blanche's sister is in a relationship that is violent and has this strange thing to try and stomach, where she's staying with a man, Stanley, who is often horrible to her, but also she her sister is very much in love and wants to have this child. And there's a conversation constantly between Blanche and her sister about why she stays, why she's there. And almost some part of it seems to be saying to Blanche, well, this is just how you have to survive in the world. And, you know, we're making do with very little money and all of these other things. But Blanche is this really intriguing character because slowly more and more is revealed about her life. And I was just utterly riveted by her as a character. She's so complex with this frenetic energy and this intensity and need to feel like she's being polite and sort of giving southern hospitality at all times, but equally is ruthless in other ways, or is terrified in other ways, or is incredibly anxious, and we find out a lot about her past, and all of these things come to the fore. And it's such a complex web that's brought up, and I love this. I love seeing really complicated characters allowed to be complicated. And without spoiling anything, the ending did slightly break me, given that I actually didn't know how it was going to end, because I had no insight into that before. I just knew the famous line of, you know, I've always relied on the kindness of strangers, and on the kind of other parts of it in the cultural imagination. But yeah, incredible play. I've got Cat on a Hot Tin Roof to try and read next as well, because I'm really excited to read a little bit more of him and kind of try and see this in play form. I really want to go and see more productions of this as well. And last but not least, I read Ootlin by Jenni Fagan. And this is a memoir. She has sort of traditionally, I think, written novels before this, like Luck and Booth. And Ootlin is her memoir, but it's an incredibly striking one for several reasons. And one of those reasons is outlined at the beginning of the book in the foreword, where she talks about how this book started as essentially a suicide letter or suicide note years and years ago. And she didn't end up taking her life, but this book was in some ways a cry for help, or a cry of just wanting to be heard and to express what had happened to her. And so this is an incredibly gut-wrenching book in many, many ways. It's a lot. If the topics in the book are not the kinds of things you can stomach reading about, them probably not for you, because it goes into a lot of detail about various things. But it essentially is a large part about her childhood and early teenage years, particularly as she was in the care system for a variety of periods of time and for a variety of reasons. So she is essentially born into care because her mother has a psychotic episode quite early into, I think, into her pregnancy. And so it's seen that Jenni Fagan's mother from the beginning is not going to be able to safely raise Jenni, or so it's believed. And so much of Jenni's life is then her going through various homes and various care homes and various adoption processes and legal processes and all of these sorts of things. And in the meantime, as is often the case with many people put into incredibly vulnerable situations, further things can happen, particularly around drugs, addiction, sex work, various other things, and abuse, and a lot of other really horrific things that happen to Jenni as she writes this. And it's staggering, because just when you think this book has reached its saddest, lowest point, something else happens, and it's a lot. Listening to this as an audiobook was a real gut punch, because you'd just be walking around, you know, doing something or going somewhere, and you just hear her talking about some of the most intense things that could really ever happen to somebody. But what I think is really quite spectacular is how she's able to turn a lot of that into what this book is. And she mentions at the end of the book that it was through a lot of therapy, it was through a lot of working through some of these things, that she was able to transform this book that she'd written years and years ago into something like Ootlin now, where she's able to look at it from a new perspective. And this isn't a book that does a big fanfare of an ending of, and now my life is perfect and turned around and everything. She is very clear in this book that a lot of this, you know, it's not I'm so glad this happened to me because I grew from it and now I'm stronger than ever. The book is very clear on, I wish that these things had never happened to me. I don't wish this on anybody. and I'm still healing from this. And the book is, in some ways, it can't have a triumphant ending. The triumph is that she's still alive, but it can't have a triumphant ending of looking back with joy necessarily. This is, you know, her saying, I survived this. I outlived this horrendous thing that happened to me. And now I'm here telling you about it. And there's something about the way she writes this that is really difficult at times, because a lot of the time you are deep in the dark parts of it. She does not spare any detail. She doesn't, you know, hold back any punches here. She will tell you things, and at times it feels like it's getting more and more miserable, but then you have to remember this is a real life. This was a thing that happened to her, and there's something really powerful about the way that she just keeps navigating deeper and deeper into what must be exceptionally painful to relive, and comes out the other side saying, well, here we go. That's my story. Yeah, really remarkable piece of writing in a lot of ways. And I'm not surprised to see it win the Gordon Byrne Prize recently, and be longlisted for the Women's Prize for Nonfiction. It's one hell of a book. It's a lot. But yeah, it's, I think, worth it if you feel like you're able to stomach some of the themes that come up in this book. So that's me talking about the books I've read this week. I hope you're doing really, really well, and I will speak to you all very soon. Have a wonderful week, and all the best.